You know, those organizations that commit felonies and get government funding, shouldn't they be cut off? I mean, convicted of felonies. I'm not talking about ACORN. I'm talking about other entities that our government does business with. Joining me on the line with an idea to do just that, and she's a woman who can make it happen, is Congresswoman Betty McCollum. Betty, thank you for joining us on the show today.
It's great to be with you, Mike, and talk about something that's really important to taxpayers and all Americans. And that's stopping corporations from ripping off our nation.
This is called the Against Corporations Organizing to Rip Off the Nation Act, which is, of course, ACORN when you do the acronym. Tell me what the connection is.
Well, last week Congress took action to defund a nonprofit that served poor Americans. And ACORN has not been convicted of any crime. They are not guilty of any felonies. And 345 members of Congress voted to defund ACORN just on the fact that a video had been produced, and it appears to me that some employees acted improperly. I'm not defending their actions. But what I saw is an opportunity to really speak to what the bigger issue is, and that's corporate accountability, and to stop corporations who knowingly have a culture of corruption that rip off taxpayers and are even, in fact, convicted of felonies and continue to receive taxpayers' dollars.
Now, it would seem like the bar has been set here pretty low. You have 345 members of Congress who voted to defund ACORN, even though there has been no conviction yet. So you'd think that they'd be open to doing something like this to corporations that have been convicted of felonies.
I would certainly hope so. If not, I would say that they're very, very hypocritical.
Now, what would this do? What would the penalty be to corporations that were convicted of a felony?
Well, this bill would prohibit a corporation with a felony conviction from receiving any federal funds for 5 years after the conviction. It would also prohibit corporate felons from making federal campaign contributions for 5 years. And it would put limits on the type of lobbying a corporation could do during that 5-year period. And so this bill is clearly targeted at corporate crooks who receive federal funding. And when fraud happens, I think the American government should step in and say, you know what, you're not going to defraud taxpayers, and we're going to put a stop to that, and that's what this bill does.
Well, if this had been already in place, do you have any examples for us on who might be in this camp, the corporate camp that would not be allowed to get government money?
Well, just recently, this past February, Pfizer pled guilty with the Justice Department to a felony, and they agreed to pay a $2.3 billion fine, a $2.3 billion fine, because they ripped off taxpayers, and they did this in a way that negatively affected health care to over 9 million military personnel, retirees, and their families. Pfizer had a drug. It was approved to be used in one way. They off-labeled the drug and pitched it through doctors, and because they wanted to make more profit in a way that it was not approved of doing it. When they got caught, they pled guilty. And I'm saying the guilty verdict is fine. Paying the fine is good, but having a government contract is a privilege, is not a right, and I think that they should be held more accountable than just a slap on the wrist.
$2.3 billion, though, that's a lot of money. Is that just a slap on the wrist?
It's not a lot of money to Pfizer. One corporate analyst said, and I'm quoting the corporate analyst, well, the $2.3 billion ain't chicken feed, it's affordable.
Okay, so by limiting essentially the corporate access to federal contracts and lobbying, that apparently would have more of an impact than just doing the fine like this. That's what I'm reading out of this?
Well, yes, because there are many examples of other corporations that that deliberately know that they're breaking the law. Eli Lilly, KBR, ExxonMobil, are examples of corporations who have been found guilty or pled guilty, and yet we continue to serve them up federal contracts. There's probably, in some of these instances, other companies that haven't broken the law that maybe we should be looking at doing business with them, so that people know in this corporate culture of corruption that the American taxpayer is not going to stand for it. And in Pfizer particularly, they put people's lives on the line by prescribing a drug for something it hadn't been approved of. They encouraged prescriptions for drugs for something that they knew hadn't been approved of. And that's dangerous.
We're talking with Congresswoman Betty McCollum about the Against Corporations Organizing to Rip Off the Nation Act, otherwise known as the ACORN Act. I have to ask you, I mean, when I look at this, are your colleagues looking at this bill as a gimmick, or is this something that they really might support?
Well, what was the gimmick was the vote on the House floor that targeted ACORN, which had not been convicted of anything. And the law was so broadly written that, in fact, if you had served on the board of directors for ACORN and or volunteered or worked indirectly for them in some way, and then you worked for a radio station, that radio station could lose its license.
Really?
Because they tainted anybody that had any association with anybody at ACORN.
Wow, I did not get that was so broad.
And they hadn't even been convicted of anything.
So where does this bill go? Everything has a process in Congress. What committee deals with it? What's the likelihood of it moving forward?
Well, I am going to ask Mr. John Conyers if I can have a hearing. And I'm going to work to get all the members of Congress who voted to defund ACORN, who had not been convicted of anything, to sign on to this bill so that we can get a fair hearing and protect taxpayers' money.
Okay. Well, Betty McCollum, keep giving them hell, okay?
Well, thanks. I think it's time to have some common sense here in Washington.
All right. Thank you very much. That's Congresswoman Betty
Thanks.
McCollum. Thank you so much for your time.